In Houston, 9. But this storm is stretching from Cuba to the Carolinas, and that is one scary big storm.
From News Channel 12, this is Tracking the Tropics, the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season. Storm Track meteorologists discuss the upcoming season and what you should do if you're faced with a tropical storm or hurricane. Now, here's Chief Meteorologist Donnie Cox.
Thanks for joining us for the 2018 Hurricane Show. We are preparing for what could be another active hurricane season, while most of you remember the destruction of last year. The predictions are out, and we will break them down for you and discuss what you may see in comparison. And we have some tips to help you prepare for the 2018 tropical activity. Up first, we only have to think back to last year and know the importance of always being ready. I will recap last year's devastating Atlantic season.
Planning ahead of time is key to hurricane season. You should know which route you're taking in the event of an evacuation. Coming up, I'll break down the hurricane evacuation routes in our area.
A roof over your head during severe weather is very important. I talked to a local contractor, so you'll know what goes into making a good roof.
The hurricane season is underway and runs through November 30th. We had a very active year last year. It's hard to forget anytime soon. I'm meteorologist Donnie Cox, along with meteorologist Les Still, meteorologist Ashley Pratt. And guys, we're here ready to go through another hurricane season, but hopefully nothing like what we saw last year. Very active.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people are starting to think, you know, with the early Alberto, are we going to have a very active season like we saw last year? That's the question I'm getting a lot of.
Well, and of course, as we look at some of the parameters and some of the predictions out from this year, we're expected to be more near normal, maybe just a little above.
Yeah, we're actually seeing those water temperatures above average for this time of year, so we could potentially see El Nino develop later, though, in the winter months. And
of course, we'll continue to track that all season long, but Les, she mentions the water temperatures. Let's talk about that a second. Last year at this time, we already had steamy water in areas that we talked about could create a problem. This year, it's a little different, but still off our coast.
Yeah, right off of our coast, and that's the key for us here. You go from basically Florida up to Massachusetts out into the central Atlantic. That's where we're actually seeing the warmer temperatures. That's out of the main development regions, as we call that, which is completely opposite this year. We normally talk about from Africa into the Bahamas and the Caribbean. That would be above normal like it was last year, fueling that early start. Right now, that is actually very cold, and it's actually a little bit unusual.
And of course, as we look at the predictions, Ashley, for this year, and we were talking about this a couple of minutes ago, when you actually come out and look, the statistics saying that we will be near normal, but this may vary a little bit, but some of those are right on the normal, which is 12 named storms and 7 hurricanes and 3 major. A little bit above that, though, in some of the projections out there.
Yeah, some of the projections are showing that across the area. If we look at Colorado State, they have the potential to see 14 named storms. North Carolina State does have those from 14 to 18 as well, and then NOAA is predicting 10 to 16 named storms, with 5 out of 9 of those becoming hurricanes and 1 out of 4 of those becoming major hurricanes. And again, like Donnie said, the normal for that time of year is 12 named storms, as well as 7 becoming hurricanes and 3 of those becoming major hurricanes.
And of course, we'll continue as we look into the season, the effect that El Nino will have on this. El Nino, it's one of those that you really can't predict the time it shows up. You just have to play it through.
Yeah, that's it. And that's why you see the wide range as far as predictions are concerned right now. We're talking about the water in the equatorial Pacific Ocean, whether it's above normal or below normal. Right now, it's kind of hovering right around normal, but there is some subsurface temperatures that looks like it will start to get us into more of that El Nino pattern, probably late into the season going into next winter. So it's when that actually occurs, how it has action going on in the Atlantic Ocean.
And of course, we'll continue to track that, but I think the main theme that everybody all across Eastern Carolina and the country is thinking right now is, let's just not have a season like we had last year.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll continue to track that and update you as we go through the season, but for the rest of our show here, we're certainly going to be showing you some tips to help you make it through the upcoming hurricane season. You can still see the images of Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Windward Islands. I will recap those storms and what you can learn from them to help you prepare.
Metal or shingles? Which is a better roof? You'll find out just ahead.
In what year did the National Hurricane Center begin naming Atlantic hurricanes with human names? A. 1946, B. 1953, C. 1960, or D. 1976? The answer right after this break. In what year did the National Hurricane Center begin naming Atlantic hurricanes with human names? A. 1946, B. 1953, C. 1960, or D. 1976? The answer is B. 1953. The U.S. began using female names in 1953, and in 1979 began using both male and female names.
The sights and sounds of destruction are still on the minds following the devastating 2017 hurricane season. Names like Harvey, Irma, Maria, and Nate stand out as destructive storms devastating thousands in the U.S. and Caribbean. This recap only scratches the surface on the impacts these storms brought in 2017.
We are now in the 2018 hurricane season. It started June 1st, and you probably can't get the images of last year out of your mind. We saw the destruction and many things displaced by the winds. Eric Hayden, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service, says while hurricane winds can cause significant damage, you should not forget the key threat.
80% of the deaths occurring with tropical systems are water related, either heavy rainfall or storm surge. Less than 10% of deaths with tropical systems are wind related. It's all about the water, not about the wind.
The water impacts were obvious in Texas. 60 inches of rain had fallen from Hurricane Harvey. Major flooding was widespread in the Lone Star State, including the Houston area where impacts were devastating. Harvey reformed as a tropical storm on August the 23rd in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, became a hurricane on August the 24th, and made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane the very next day. This did not give much time to issue advance warnings, and Hayden says a new product should help with that.
One thing I love that was a test last year and is operational this year is the earliest reasonable onset of tropical storm force winds. So this gives you an earliest reasonable onset of sustained tropical storm force winds. That's a new product that is operational this year.
The very next storm was developing before the remnants of Harvey were gone. Irma becoming a tropical storm in the eastern Atlantic on August 30th, upgrading to a hurricane on August 31st, and becoming a major hurricane on September 1st. Irma reached Category 5 status and devastated parts of the Caribbean and the U.S.
This storm is wider than our entire state.
The impacts were catastrophic in the Florida Keys as Irma turned north from Cuba and ripped into the lower Keys as a Category 4 storm. The destruction was catastrophic. Irma then continued north on the western side of Florida, coming ashore at Marco Island, Florida. It was a Category 3 storm at landfall. That storm then continued its northward track, and Irma remained a Category 1 storm all the way to near Gainesville before being downgraded to a tropical storm.
A tropical system can cause a lot of impacts more than just wind, and those same things you saw down in Texas, that or even Florida could happen here in eastern North Carolina on any given year.
There were 4 other major storms last year, and Maria was the second within a couple of weeks to head toward the Caribbean islands, including Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. This was a severe blow to those islands, still cleaning up from Irma. The devastation was catastrophic in Puerto Rico and left most without power for months. Maria then turned northwest and appeared to be headed toward the southeastern part of the U.S., but a turn to the north took Maria close to our coast. Maria was one of 3 storms to pass between our coast and Bermuda. The other 2 were Gert and Jose. Even with the storms remaining offshore, our coast always receives impacts with large waves, overwash, coastal flooding, erosion, and rip current. The season ended with 17 named storms. 10 became hurricanes and 6 were major, which is a Category 3 or higher.
When you see storms like these, it reminds you that being prepared in advance is the best advice in doing all you can do. Unless, sometimes, knowing what it takes to keep a roof over your head is so important.
Yeah, Donnie, that's exactly right. After Hurricane Irene hit us in 2011, you could see many buildings across our area with tarps covering the roof damage. I spoke to one local builder who shows us how roofs are designed to withstand the winds during hurricanes. The roof of your home isn't something that most of us think about on a regular basis. That is, until it gets damaged or begins to leak. The International Building Code states roofs must serve to protect the building. That means during storm events, such as hurricanes, they need to be constructed to resist not only strong wind, but also rain and even wind-driven debris. Chuck Chilton of Artisan East Custom Homes explains we need to understand that roofs are designed to withstand different wind speeds based on where you live in eastern North Carolina.
Wind zones vary from 90 to up to 150 miles an hour in eastern North Carolina, depending on where you're located.
That structural design for being able to withstand those specific wind speeds starts from the ground up. Local home inspectors are here to guarantee things are built to code. The basic elements of a building's roof are all the same. Things like rafters, sheathing, and that outer layer of shingles or metal. But the specs on these roof components can vary depending on your building. Chuck says the best way to know what you have is to take a trip up to your attic.
Check just that, the spacing of the rafters. A lot of times if you look on the underneath side of that, you can see the labeling on that sheathing to see if it's 5/8 or 1/2 inch.
If you have a need or desire to replace what covers your roof, you might wonder what's better, asphalt shingles or metal?
Hands down, a metal roof, standing seam metal roof is by far the best roof that you can put on a house.
Now that Chuck has settled that debate, he does add a metal roof isn't cheap.
But everybody can afford that. It's about 2 to 2.5 times the cost of shingles.
So why does a professional builder say a metal roof is better?
Just because there are no areas for wind or wind shear to get up under that metal to pull it off. So it's a solid, seamless roof and nowhere for air to penetrate.
Chuck does say a metal roof's only downfall is it can be damaged by hail from a severe thunderstorm. If you're like most of us and have asphalt roof shingles, remember that the way each individual shingle is nailed to the sheathing underneath is important.
And you're looking for 6 nails underneath there to make sure in this wind zone down here in eastern North Carolina that you're not going to lose shingles inadvertently.
So whether building a new home or replacing an existing roof, Chuck advises that you educate yourself a little bit about roof construction. This will help keep you and your contractor on the same page when it comes to protecting your property.
Knowing the hurricane evacuation routes in our area is important, especially when a hurricane could impact our area. Coming up, I'll show you the evacuation routes in eastern North Carolina.
Who typically has the most tropical cyclones each year, the northern or southern hemisphere? We'll have the answer right after this break. Who typically has the most tropical cyclones each year, the northern or southern hemisphere? The answer is the northern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere usually experiences about half the number of storms each year compared to the northern hemisphere.
Hurricane season is officially here, eastern North Carolina. This means now is the time to prepare before any storms threaten us, so you're not caught off guard at the last second. Make sure you have a plan in place in case you and your family need to evacuate. Whether you're new to eastern North Carolina or have lived here for years,
planning is the key.
Pamlico County Emergency Manager Chris Murray says,
Know where you're at, know where the history of where you're at. If you've been affected multiple times over here by storm events in eastern North Carolina, I'm a firm believer there's a good chance it's going to happen again.
Every hurricane is different. If the area you live in didn't flood during past hurricanes, that doesn't mean it won't flood with the next one.
A lot of times people will try to stay put. That's not a safe thing to do, because if we're having to rescue somebody that has chose to stay, it's taking us away from some other duty that we may need to perform. If evacuation is in place, you need to go ahead and evacuate.
The hurricane evacuation routes for all of eastern North Carolina are Highway 70, 17, 64, 264, 55, 40, 12, and 24. Specifically for Pamlico County,
It's Highway 55 to Highway 70 in New Bern,
and or Highway 55 to Highway 17 in Bridgeton. You know, one route's going west, one's going north. Depending on, you know, how the storm's coming in, we kind of suggest which way that needs to happen. We don't want to send someone into the path of a storm.
Know your evacuation route ahead of time. If a storm looks like it could impact our area, emergency managers like Chris Murray will use TV, radio, and other methods to give you at least 48 to 72 hours notice to evacuate.
You decide to stay, that's your decision. You know, one of the little slogans that floats around in the emergency management and storm world is the first 72 are on you.
Emergency managers and North Carolina state troopers plan to prepare well ahead of time so they're ready for hurricane season.
Everybody gets together and everybody knows their part, and we learn from each storm. After each storm, we kind of look at how things work and do we need to change anything. We work with local, county, and state officials to see if we need to make any changes to our evacuation routes and see how we can make things work more efficiently.
If you want a copy of the hurricane evacuation routes in our area, you can go to our mobile app or website. You can find the list on our sites in the news page, which is under the Explore tab or News tab.
When you prepare for a new hurricane season, remember it takes just one storm to be devastating.
And the best thing you can do is have a plan in place, practice it, and stick to it if the time comes.
We will show you some things to keep in mind and have prepared before the storm strikes coming up.
What year saw the fewest number of named storms in the Atlantic Basin? A, 2005, B, 1998, C, 1983, or D, 1933? We'll have the answer right after this break. What year saw the fewest number of named storms in the Atlantic Basin? A, 2005, B, 1998, C, 1983, or D, 1933? The answer is C, 1983, with 4 named storms.
Again, into the hurricane season, we want you to be prepared. And of course, as we go into the hurricane season, whether it's one storm or 10, it only takes one storm.
Yep, that's right. I mean, Andrew, 1992, one storm that tore up South Florida was the last one that really set the benchmark as far as building standards were concerned in South Florida, and that was the only storm that made landfall that entire year.
And like I say, with one storm, if it's a Category 5 or a Category 4, it's a big one. But even whenever you look at tropical storms can create the problems here, and you have to keep that in mind.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you go back to the last hurricane we actually had hit here was Arthur in 2014. You'll notice the eye now starting to show up here. That was the one that came on the holiday weekend, July 4th, and as a result, we had a lot of people that were trapped in here that were trying to decide whether they should leave, whether they should not leave. They were new to the area. Now is the time to start thinking and preparing. What if you're going to be traveling to a place? Do you need to evacuate? How are you going to be able to evacuate?
And speaking of the evacuation, you talked about the evacuation plans, but another thing you need to have included in the evacuation plan is your kit.
Yeah, whether you're staying here or you are leaving, you do need to make a hurricane kit. It's very important to have those important documents with you, all your medicine you need, and don't forget about the pets as well. They're going to need that food and water to last them at least 3 days, and for you as well. And you'll need 1 gallon per person per day, so just, you know, go to the stores early and prepare to get that stuff. And if you're writing it out at home, make sure you know to grab flashlights and batteries, as well as the NOAA weather radio, Donnie.
You definitely need the NOAA weather radio because you can program this to your county, and that is always important because you want to know when the impacts are closest to you. We've seen that with tornadoes, we've seen that with the hurricanes, even flooding. You can certainly get this, and we'll even help you program it. The instructions will be on our website. You'll be able to do that, and of course, you can probably just find an easy instruction sheet on how to do this from the information that we have online with us. But again, you can program it for your individual area, and as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, if you're asleep in the middle of the night, then and it's something that needs impact as you go into the overnight, that is going to wake you up.
Yeah, I was going to say, with Irene, we had 7 tornado warnings, 4 of which came out in the middle of the night.
But one thing that we do want to keep in mind as we do plan, and you talked about that in your evacuation route, is don't wait to the last minute.
Yeah, don't ever wait to the last minute. Make sure that you have a plan well ahead of time. It just makes everything so much easier, and you can practice it with your family as well. It's always better to be prepared for something that doesn't happen than to be caught off guard for something that could happen. And again, like we said, it only takes one storm to make a bad year.
And we do want to also mention this, talking about the one storm status here, and that one storm thing is, it doesn't matter the category, so don't get hung on the numbers. We can't stress that enough.
That's right. Don't get hung on the numbers, and don't forget about new ways of being alerted and staying informed. Again, everybody's got their mobile device. Now's the time to make sure you've got extra batteries and charged on that, and make sure you stay informed. And of course, we want to see anything that you're seeing. Back in 2011 with Irene, we first learned about the pier collapsing from somebody sending us a picture. So make sure you download and connect through Chime In as well.
Well, we certainly will be here to keep you up to date. The one thing that we hope you take away from our discussion here is the start of the hurricane season, and that you are prepared. And we will be on the air updating you online and on our mobile app and social media. For Les Steele and Ashley Pratt, I'm Donnie Cox, wishing you a good night.
This has been a News Channel 12 special presentation, Tracking the Tropics, the 2018 hurricane season. Storm Track 12 meteorologists will be tracking every storm this hurricane season and alerting you to severe weather danger.